Welcome to 54665. I'm your host, Nora Roughen-Schmidt, and I'm here today with my friend Alycann Taylor. Alycann, welcome to 54665, the podcast about all things Viroqua, entrepreneurs, small business, and anything else we can think of. So, welcome, Alycann. I think we should clap her in. There it is.
Thank you guys for welcoming me here.
Yay.
I appreciate the opportunity.
We're so glad to have you. So tell us a little bit about your business and about how long you've been in Viroqua.
Okay, well, my husband and I own Bluedog Cycles. That's on Main Street here in Viroqua. We opened the business in October of 2005. So we've been here about 13 years.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. We've had 3 different locations. We started by the Cheese Corner. And then in 2010, we moved to the Dahl Pharmacy building.
Mm-hmm. A much bigger space.
Much
it was
bigger
like
space.
5 times the size.
It was, yes. That first building, I can't believe we had a bike shop in. I'm pretty sure it was like 600 square feet.
It's a great way to start, though.
It was. It was a safe way to start and feel out the community.
Sure.
And then recently, we've been in our new space for a year where we purchased the old Simply Country building with a partner, Mike Core, who owns the upstairs and we own the downstairs. So,
yeah. And the new space is absolutely beautiful.
thank you. It's good.
Yeah, it's super good. So tell me, you are not native to the area here. So what made you decide to...
Why?
Yes.
Viroqua?
Why Viroqua of all places for your business and to start a family?
So we were living in Idaho, but we both are Wisconsin natives. And we had our daughter, Wilma, in May of 2005 with no intention or plans to move. My husband had been working in the cycling industry for a long time, and we had written a couple business plans to open a business in Idaho. And then the baby came, and we realized how far away we were from our family, and
Sure.
we just weren't, that's not our childhood experience. So we wanted to get close to home, but not too close to home. I
Sure.
grew up outside Milwaukee, and my husband grew up in La Crosse. I had never heard of Viroqua, but my husband said Viroqua was the place to go, and I was just postpartum enough to listen to him.
And here we are.
And here we are. Yeah, that's how it happened. And there's lots of winding roads that led us here, but really it was fast. Wilma was born in May. We moved in August, and we opened a business in October.
Wow.
It was a big leap of faith. But I will say we had a friend who lived here and said, this is a community that if you're passionate about what you do, will completely support it. And that has been proven to be true time and time again.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. Tell me what it's like being a mom and owning a business and doing all the things that you do. How do you find time for everything that Alycann Taylor is able to do?
Well, I think all of us, I do think parents in general have a great ability to find that balancing act. And some days are harder than others. But to make this work, the Taylor family, has to be flexible.
Sure.
And we have to wear a lot of different hats because it's not easy to own a small business in a small town. And if you aren't excited about it, no one else is going to be. So
Sure.
to be present and active in your community, whether it's being a part of your children's school or a part of city government or a part of just daily activities, that helps create excitement. That in turn will help create excitement for your business.
Mm-hmm. And also some long days.
Yes, long days.
Very long
And
days.
a lot of patience.
Yep.
But it's good. I also, by my nature, like to be busy, so that helps the cause.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. I think you would have to, especially with your schedule. Your schedule is intense. So, yeah, right on. So tell me a little bit about starting a business and taking that initial leap. You know, you moved here very quickly after your daughter was born and you found a space and you opened the business and you and your husband had done some planning. How did you get from the idea and the desire stage to the reality stage? It sounds like that happened relatively quickly for you.
It did happen very quickly. I think a lot of that was just the driving force of we want this to happen. And so we kept pushing. We had friends here, so that was helpful. We had a lot of community members get on board with this leap of faith. The Cheese Corner, Tina Triggerstead, they didn't have a rental next to them, but Pete just asked, would you ever think about renting that? So it was just, sure, that would be great. Let's build that out. Things just fell in line. There was a cycling rep who lived in the area by the name of John Sherwin, and he is kind of one of our local heroes because he didn't know us at all, but he wanted a bike shop for this community. So he was willing to say, yep, let's get lines of bikes in here. And so it really was a collaborative effort of people who believed this was the right thing for this community.
Did you ever have any doubts when you opened the business?
Of course.
So
we opened a business in a bike shop in a town of 4,500 in October.
Right.
There were some doubts. And I had a new baby.
Right.
But we did it. So it was either we're going to do our best to make it work, or, there were doubts, but there weren't so many doubts that we didn't have an option. It was to succeed or not to succeed.
Right.
We did some things. We were able to sell our home in Idaho, and we were able to invest in a business a little bit, and we were smart about those early months. So I guess if there were new businesses thinking about starting up here, I would really think about winter and how, if you're that first year, how can you help those winter months? So for us, we invested to make sure we had kind of our rent paid for those first few winter months, because winter's different.
Right. So tell me about, why is winter different? What should people who are opening a business or thinking about opening a business know about winter?
Okay. That's a good question. Winter's different as a whole, I believe, for any business, because the holidays leading up to it is just by our culture a shopping experience. Then once the holidays are gone, there's that lull because they've spent their resources for the holidays, right?
Sure.
So that I just think is a natural trend. Then you add a business like ours, which is at least very much in the beginning, seasonal.
Sure.
Because cycling in winter, although some do it, most don't. So that poses a different kind of financial strain or stress.
Certainly.
It can. And so I think that's where you have to get really creative and engage your community and get them part of the excitement of what you're bringing to this town or any town.
Sure.
Because they want you to succeed if they're part of the movement, if you will.
Of course.
You know,
shopping locally is a big push.
The movement. And for us, we want people to have fun outside. So that's one approach. But we as a business started thinking, well, what can we do in winter? That's fun. If we have snow, snowshoeing's great. If we can cross-country ski, let's do that. We started a Nordic ski program for kids, or we built on one. We didn't start it, but we helped keep one going.
Sure.
Like anything you can get excitement around outside is what we want to do. We did we do a candlelight snowshoe stomp for adults called the Love Stomp.
Awesome.
And it's just sweet. And it takes the fear of winter out for some people.
Sure.
That we started this past year, fat biking is a big trend in cycling, and you need specially groomed trails in winter fat biking, and we've gained access at the VFW in town, so we can do that now. So all those little things to get people excited about going outside helps us get through the winter months.
Right.
And then in turn, hopefully people coming in town are helping our neighbors, our fellow business owners, get some activity in their shops during the winter months too.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, the creative aspect is absolutely essential.
Yeah. And it makes your business fun too.
Right.
You know,
right.
Because it is a small business and you are the most passionate about it, but it still works sometimes. So you got to keep that fresh too, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. What advice would you give to somebody who's listening now who wants to open a business? They're ready to try it. They're ready for that 600 square foot location. They really want to give it a go. What are 3 things you didn't anticipate that were challenges?
I think being in business with your spouse or your partner can be can be super rewarding and super challenging.
Sure.
For a variety of reasons. And I don't know that that's for every couple. So I think that if you're going into it as a couple, you should really, are you strong communicators? Can you listen good to each other? Can you do your strengths balance the other person's weaknesses? And that's helpful.
Sure.
I think in general, when you go into business, you have to be clear on what you're trying to accomplish, because the minute you open the doors, things get really cloudy.
Sure.
People have different opinions. The way you thought something should go doesn't go that way. And so if you can have a solid vision on how you want it to go, that's important, because it can get watered down.
Absolutely. Well, and I think we've all seen that with certain businesses where they start with one direction and then they're very quickly moving in another. And that's confusing to customers.
It is. And it can be challenging to maintain as a business owner if you have lost focus on what your true focus is.
Sure.
So I think that's one. But on the flip side, you have to be flexible, right? You got to meet the needs of the community too. You have to really try to keep true to your vision and see what your customer base wants from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about hours of operation?
Oh, sure.
Is that something that can be a challenge?
I think that's a big challenge
Okay.
because typically you're starting small. When we opened, it was my husband and myself, and we had a small child at home. And we're all used to, in a retail world, being open 7 days a week for a variety of hours. For a small business owner, that's challenging if you want to have that balanced work life.
Sure.
And I think on Main Street, we see that as a challenge too sometimes. We have tourists who come in and they wonder, why aren't shops open on Sundays and Mondays? And
Sure.
that's a balance, probably because the shop owners need to have some time with their family. But from a consumer perspective, is that the best way to go? And that, I do think, is a different kind of challenge when you have a staff of less than 5 people.
Sure, of course.
Bigger staffs can handle that more, can handle a variety of hours of operation. But it is a challenge. It's also, I think you also have to be consistent with your hours. I think that's been a big mistake with new business owners too, that you change it up too much that people don't know when you're open, so then they just stop coming.
Definitely.
So you do have to find that sweet spot of making sure you're accommodating your home life, but being consistent so people know when to find you.
Definitely. How did you determine your hours of operation? You spoke about having a little bit of family time and being closed just a little bit, but how did you decide your opening and closing time? Did you play with those a little bit for a couple of years, or has it always been consistent? What was your approach to that?
So our original hours were 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Wednesday and Saturday. Those were our original hours.
Sure.
And the reasoning behind that had a lot to do with just having a baby at home. That really was. And it was unpredictable when I would go find my own job because we knew that was coming. So we had to, that was just kind of a personal balance. As the business grew, we extended our hours, but the days haven't changed at this point.
Okay.
The shorter hours, the shorter days on Wednesdays, that we just changed this year, because what we used to do, and we still do, we just now have staff that can keep us open longer, is Wednesdays was always a day that we went and worked outside to create trail opportunities and recreational opportunities for the community. So while the shop was closed, we were out working in a different capacity.
Sure.
And we just, that was important. That was equally important to our business model, to make sure that we were not only selling you outdoor recreation, but providing you a place to use it and play in it.
So when you got to the point as a business where you were ready to hire some help, when did that occur and what did that feel like? How did you know it was time for another person? Your first hire.
Our first hire. Well, okay, technically our first employee, I'm not even sure he was a hire. I got to give Dallas Severs a little prop. He was a kid at the time. I think I want to say he was maybe 13 years old. I should know that, but he actually was under the Bluedog Cycles coming soon sign when the moving truck pulled up, and he was there to unload us because he was so excited about a bike shop. So he was there. I'm not sure we paid him at the beginning because he just has always been a part of it. So as a young kid, he became, he'd help take out the trash and he'd help do that kind of support. Our first, I'd say, true employee was Daryl Anders. I don't know if you know Daryl. He's been in the community a long time. And if I remember the story right, Pete may have a different version, that he was a cyclist and they'd hang out at the shop and he would come in. He had a full-time job. He'd come in and kind of help Pete with some mechanical to help clear the board, the service work, because once spring hit, things were picking up and we were in that spot. Like, we really need help, but I'm not sure we can really afford that yet. And Daryl just loved what we were doing. So he just sort of jumped in. And then at one point, I think we wanted to go away for like a long weekend. And Daryl just stepped in and said, I will cover so you guys can go. And then he became an employee. And other things with Daryl evolved, but it was almost like another community member stepped up and said, looks like you guys need some help and I'm going to help you. And we accepted it.
Yeah.
So,
because that step, having that first actual employee and all the things that go along with it, from payroll taxes to, trying to create a human resources system that's like reasonable and effective. You have background and experience in that, so that's relatively easy for you. What advice do you give to others on that?
I did have experience in that, but I will be honest, I didn't have experience in setting it up.
Sure.
I walked into the department, like, here's your department. I'm like, oh, great, everything's set up. So I asked a lot of questions. I do think technology has evolved in terms of like QuickBooks is really accessible. And if you set things up properly, that can really help you with tax stuff. But it would be great. I've never found, maybe there is like 101 taxes for new business owners, because there are a lot that come at different times of the year. And if you don't know, you don't know. And the IRS doesn't forgive you for not knowing.
Correct.
But that is where I asked a fellow business owner and said, give me a calendar of when all these are due. And then I just went to figure out how you made them, how you filed them. But that's ultimately what I had to do.
Yep.
Because while I had experience, again, all the systems were set up. It was much different.
Right. Right.
So those are the little things that can get overwhelming.
And tell me a little bit about some of the creating the trails and providing opportunities for silent sports, really. How did you first decide to start doing that? It seems like a really phenomenal way, not only of contributing to your business and helping your customers so that they have places to use all of this fantastic equipment, but also it seems like a really nice way to give back to the community.
I think it's both. We've given back to the community and offered a space that we want our children to grow up in. But we also knew, moving here over a decade ago, we had to create a community of cyclists, and in turn we had to create a community of outdoor recreationalists. Not that they weren't here before, but we were the new people. Like, why should we go to Bluedog Cycles? So we felt that we had to help raise awareness to that. So ways that we have done that is we really tap into our youth programs. We have a mountain bike camp for kids every year called Camp Bluedog. We do a Nordic ski program. This year we kicked off a youth mountain bike team that competed throughout the state of Wisconsin. It was middle school through high school. So just trying to get people involved.
Which is really cool.
Which is great. We also moved to an area that has rich with beautiful topography, but they didn't have much in terms of shared use single track trail networks. As a matter of fact, when we came, there was 1 mile in the county, and now we've gained access or created or collaborated with over 50 miles. That's impressive.
It's very impressive.
And it's not just impressive because we've started. It's impressive because the community came and said, yeah, we want this too. So they got on board. I mean, we have hundreds and hundreds of hours of volunteers that just come because that's what they want. They want the place to play outside.
Right. It's really cool. It's like the best kind of community building and architecture of a place to, it's very cool. So bravo. That's really good work. So in addition to all of these other hats, running this nonprofit, and we'll get into this in another episode, but what's it like forming a nonprofit and putting all of those things together? That has to be a tremendous amount of work as well. The organizing of the volunteers, seeking funds, etc.
Yes, Vernon Trails became a 501c3 about the same time Bluedog Cycles, or maybe a year later. So we're about a year behind. Now, there was some structure to it by other community members. So that again was a community member coming into Bluedog Cycles saying, hey, we have this nonprofit, but we're not really doing anything with it, but it kind of ties in with what you guys want to do. So what do you think? So again, just someone showing up saying this is what we want for this community. We've been lucky. We're 100% volunteer run. So people who show up want to be there. They're not getting paid. This is something they are passionate about. Yes, there's always challenges. We are a small pool in terms of how much money is out there to share with all the wonderful organizations. But again, I think if you lead with passion for your community and what you really think is the right thing to do, people get on board. Some years are stronger than others, but isn't that true for everything? Right?
Absolutely. Well, and all the different things that you and your husband are doing really speaks to the value of relationships and relationship marketing and how important that is for a business, whether it's a business or a nonprofit, being involved in the community, being visible in the community, creating new things in a community is always a good way to take people back to your business or to your nonprofit to participate. So it's a really smart approach. And, as we've discussed, it's a time-consuming, all-encompassing approach sometimes, but I think it's good advice for new businesses to make sure that they're as involved as possible because it does help.
It's true. It also, though, helps as a person. I moved to a community. I didn't know people. I had a 3-month-old baby. So to get out there, to get out of your comfort zone, to just meet and talk to new people was a benefit not only to our business, but just to me. I've met so many people. Yeah. One of my favorite things to do in the summer is I have the No Woman Left Behind bike ride, and we kick off at the bike shop on Tuesday evenings. And I did that because I didn't know women. I didn't know people in the community. And I'm not a super fast cyclist. I like getting out there and meeting people. And so it truly is no woman left behind because I'm usually the last one. But I've met like a tremendous amount of women from all different ages and backgrounds and all over this county that has just been great over the last decade. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I know some of those women I could call up that I haven't seen in a couple of years and say, hey, come on down. We need some help. And they'd be there in a second. And that's great.
Yeah, it's really valuable. That's awesome. For sure. Other things, other words of advice for businesses. Anything that you can think of, there's no manual for this stuff.
No, there isn't.
We've tried to find one. It doesn't exist.
And I don't have any great sage-like words other than don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to speak up if you think you don't know something or don't think something's quite right. Utilize resources out there. I think sometimes people think they can find it all on the internet and they think they know all the answers just by themselves. But sometimes just some of the best resources I had when we started was going next door to Tina at the Cheese Corner and saying, hey, what do you do with this tax report? And she said, oh, this one is, you do this one. And it makes a great deal of difference in building confidence when you have somebody who can just talk you through the things that you didn't know. You don't have a finance department. You don't have a HR department. You don't get a marketing department. Right. You don't get all those great pockets that you may have experienced in other workplaces. That you are all those things. And some of them suffer as a result of that. And you just do your best. But if you can work with your neighbors and not be afraid to ask questions, that will be a strong key to success.
Definitely.
I think for us, our hardest struggle ever, and it still is, and we hope that we're cresting it a little bit, but it's been over a decade, is marketing. We do a lot of things, and we're lucky if we get the word out like 2 weeks before we do it. It's just our reality. It's our biggest struggle is how we market ourselves, because you pick and choose what's the biggest priority. So it's okay to have shortcomings. It's just better to know what they are and see how you can overcome them.
And marketing is really challenging just in general because people are digesting so many different forms of media now. And I know at the chamber office, we are constantly looking at where we're getting the most traffic, who's paying attention, age ranges, really trying to get a feel for what is the most effective. And we are still finding hands down that social media is the ticket.
It's also probably one of the most affordables for small business.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Are you finding that social media really kind of does it for your business?
Well, Nora, to be honest, social media is what we utilize the most. So I don't have a great contrast and comparison to something else. Yep. It's the most affordable and it is the easiest to accomplish. So I don't know how to answer that because I have stopped doing as much print advertising as I used to do. And I'm sorry for all the print advertising people of the world. I haven't seen a big shift when I stopped doing that and started picking up social media more. So, but that could just be for our industry. There could be other areas where that is a very needed marketing tool. I have not noticed a difference by pulling back on some of that print media.
Sure. And that's valuable feedback for somebody starting out who maybe has a marketing budget of a couple $100.
Right.
So,
and
it is possible to start on Facebook and Instagram.
It absolutely is. And that's where you asked before, like, what would be some advice? It can be overwhelming at first because so many people are coming to you to sell you probably great products, but you only have $100. So how do you pick and choose? And so somehow be prepared for that when you open your doors, that there's going to be credit card companies coming your way and there's going to be advertising. And I can't even tell you how many like phone books I advertised in the beginning and I'm not even sure where they went. And that part can get overwhelming. So come up with a plan early and stick to it. Or
like you were saying before, seek out some people who have been on Main Street or wherever you are opening your business and chat with them about how they have navigated all this. Check in with your chamber, do all of those things to make sure that you get the information and advice that you need. And sometimes those veteran businesses can be awesome allies. So it's always really good to collaborate and connect and get information.
That's true.
From people who've
also
been there.
Also trust your gut too, though, because some of us who've been around a while, I can throw myself in that, we can get stuck too in what we think worked. and not try something new.
Sure.
So like, don't be afraid to try things new as well. Just know what you're trying and does it match your mission and your vision.
Yeah. And that's, mentioning mission and vision, is that something that you and Pete return to in your business? Do you ever, I know that your schedule is so fast paced that it's probably pretty hard to take a lot of time for reflection, maybe on the anniversary of the opening date every year or whatever. But do you ever sit and talk about why you started, how you started, and make sure that you're still in line with that, even as you've grown and arguably become a more sophisticated entity? Do you ever return to some of your initial whys?
Sure. And overall, we are still really strong with those initial whys. The times now, that's a good question. So for us, sometimes when things are feeling overwhelming or frustrating, or, oh my gosh, there's another event and I don't know if I can do this, and I just finished this, you get overwhelmed. Everyone gets overwhelmed.
Sure.
And if you've overscheduled, then, you get even more overwhelmed. But it's in those moments where we actually intentionally stop what we're doing and then try to count back the goodness that we've either provided in our life because of this business or been able to return. And sometimes for Pete, it'll be like, I just biked home from work and I counted 10 bikes we sold to little kids. And it's not about selling the bikes. It's about 10 kids on bikes. Like that fuels and it inspires. Or, so those things, like we check in when the stresses that aren't really all that important, they're stresses of the moment, or, oh my gosh, I got to pay this bill and I forgot to do this, or those are all the stresses that you can get wrapped up, like in anybody, whether you're a business owner or not, you can get wrapped up in the small stresses. But that's like the most important time to pause and say, do we still like doing this? Are we still finding meaning in this? And the answer has always been 110% yes.
That's powerful.
It is powerful.
So every time that we interview someone on the show, we always try to get to know them in a little bit different way. So tell us something about Pete and Alycann Taylor that other people wouldn't know or nobody has asked. Like, what's your favorite music? What's your favorite food? What are you into when you're not wearing your business owner hats?
Well, if time were always available, right? I think Pete and I enjoy our time outside together probably the most. And before we had kids and business and all that, we loved going to see live music. We don't get to do those things as frequently now, right? Because we have kids and like everybody. But ultimately, Pete and I have a good balance in our relationship in that I am a little more grounded than Pete, but I can't always be so grounded. So he will bring me up to a different place, and I maybe will bring him to a different place to create that balance. But at the end of the day, if we could, we'd play in the woods and go camping and listen to music and, eat good food or any food, really, as long as we were doing it together. We've been friends a long time. I met him. He was my neighbor. We started as friends, and it grew from there. And we actually met. Here's something that not everybody knows. We met because Pete had a dog named Blue, and Blue showed up at my back door with a football in his mouth, and I ended up walking this dog that I didn't know named Blue. So that is where Bluedog Cycles came to be, and that is ultimately how he and I met.
What a cool, I love that. I love hearing things like that. That's fantastic. Very good. Yeah. Well, Alycann, it has been a pleasure chatting with you today, as always. And everybody else, you're listening to 54665, podcast from Viroqua about all things relevant to business, entrepreneurs, and startups. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.